I am joined by James White. Field Yates minicamp. All right, so first play we're going to look at, 2nd and 2, one of the Patriots' first offensive plays. What's going on, everyone? Taylor Kyles here for CLNS Media, coming at you with another episode of Pat's Daily, brought to you by our good friends at Prize Picks. And today, I'm joined by a man who, honestly, at this point, probably should be in the intro. Amit, we're going to have to work on that after the show. But for now, he's here on your screens. Evan Lazar, Patriots.com, friend of the show, pioneer, fair to say, of CLNS Media, and one of our favorite people to have, as always, buddy. Welcome back to the show. And you're going to have to start a new tradition over on the show. Your first time doing it. We ask people now about the favorite show or movie that they've seen recently that they want to put us in the audience onto. I say us like Cadlic's here. He's away enjoying nice weather and beaches because he just got married. But I'm asking you, buddy, what is the best show or movie you've seen recently that you would recommend for the audience and myself?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. We've been watching Stick on Apple TV with Owen Wilson. It's pretty good. I like it. I don't know. I'm still not 100% sold yet, but I've liked the first 3 or 4 episodes. It's kind of like a Ted Lasso type feel to it. You know, it's he's a golfer, failed former golfer, and he finds this like prodigy kid that he wants to train and things like that. So it's got a little sports, a little feel good like Ted Lasso. So I like it.
Okay, I dig that. And Apple TV churns them out, man. They've got like some of the best content out there right now. All right,
absolutely.
So we got the entertainment out of the way. Now let's get to some Patriots football, because we have spent the last couple of weeks down there at Foxborough watching these guys, OTAs, minicamp, reduced from 3 practices down to 2. So I'm curious. We're going to get into a lot of the nitty-gritty, but overarching thoughts on the offense and defense. What would you say were your biggest takeaways this spring on both sides of the ball?
Well, it's exciting to see what they have in store for the offense. And Josh McDaniels is one of my personal favorites, but just seeing him again and seeing him work as an offensive coordinator just looks so at home with the play sheet in his hand and the headset on. And it just looks like he belongs in that role. And that's not to take a shot at him as a head coach, but it's very clear he's extremely comfortable as an offensive coordinator versus as a head coach. So I really liked what I saw so far about what they have brewing with Drake Maye, which I'm sure we can get into here in a little bit. But just that whole brain trust there, Vrabel, McDaniels, and May moving forward, I think everybody should be pretty optimistic about what they have in store there.
When it comes to Drake specifically, I was talking to Brian about this. I know a lot's been made about the Earhart Perkins and McDaniels offense and all the difficulties that it comes with. And, you know, we asked him during practices about the post-snap adjustments. He downplayed it. Pop kind of downplayed it as well. And honestly, I feel like this system is going to be easier for him because it's a lot of learning. It's a lot of concepts and things that intuitively make sense if you see the field well, versus a West Coast, which is a lot of memorization, right? Because it's a lot of verbiage and kind of chunky names. So do you feel like this actually might be a system that's a little bit more natural for him to adjust to than a West Coast, where, again, it's not quite as, you know, we're trying to bunch all these concepts into one word so we can use it in a bunch of different looks. It's really more everything kind of has its own place.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we talked to Drake, a lot last year about how he sees the field and how he reads defenses. And so much of what he had to say was about just seeing space and just seeing openings and pockets in the defense and wanting his guys to run into that type of space. And that's what this entire offense is. That's the entire, really the foundation, or the real idea of the entire system is, why would I break into coverage when I could break away from coverage? It's really that simple. So as long as the two, people, the receiver and the quarterback, are seeing it the same way, I think that's probably the one thing that's the hardest part about this system, is that you have to really be one mind and read defenses exactly the same. As long as you have that down, then in theory, I think it's a great fit for him. And we saw that with Brady. There were times where receivers were in the circle of trust, and then there are times when they weren't in the circle of trust. And that's the biggest challenge, I would say. Some of the pre-snap stuff, which I've definitely talked about a lot, maybe I even overblow that a little bit, I would say. I think that there's some elements that worry me just with a young quarterback. Like, he hasn't seen everything yet. So like when they get in there against a really creative defensive coordinator, Is he going to see that pressure coming? Is he going to see, those blitzes and whatever sims or exotics that those coaches have ready for him? Is he going to be able to get everybody pointed in the right direction? We'll see. But in general, I feel really good about what they're going to do. And I think there's enough of blend of new and old from what we saw in the spring that they should be off and running here.
Definitely. And you mentioned that defense is probably going to throw a lot at him. He's going against a defense that's got a lot of older guys that we saw, especially in that last minicamp practice, a lot of funky looks because they're working a lot of 3rd and long situations. So what did you think overarching about the defense? Because this was a unit where, like, especially health-wise, there were some questions on what exactly it was going to look like going into this new kind of regime. But personally, it quieted a lot of the concerns I had because this unit looked pretty good, all things considered, in my opinion. But what did you see?
Yeah, I think the strength is obviously going to be those two corners, and you can really build everything off of having Christian Gonzalez and Carlton Davis back there. I think, over the years, Belichick's defenses were always the best when they had shut down corners, or at least one, Ty Law or Darrelle Revis or Gilmore, now Gonzo. Like, those are really when you can almost get more creative, and you really only need 5 guys to cover if you have a guy that's that good at doing it on the outside. So that can be really fun and creative. But I would say my biggest takeaway just from watching these practice, although Gonzo is probably that front four and what they have in store with Milton Williams, Christian Barmore, Keon White, Harold Landry, maybe a little bit of Chazon, cycling in there in situations. But Barmore and Milton Williams are tied at the hip. They are together. They are a tandem, and they're going to really get after it, hopefully, here. And seeing Barmore be full tilt and have no limitations and look like he's in great shape. That was one of my biggest things going into the spring that I wanted to see are those blood clots, which was obviously a very serious situation. All of that truly behind Christian Barmore, because they need the guy that they paid. Like, they need that level of Christian Barmore to hit some of these win totals that people are throwing out there. So hopefully that will be the case.
And obviously, if Barmore is full go, we talk about the cornerstones of this defense. Gonzo and Carlton Davis are obviously very good, but I'm going with Milton Williams and Christian Barmore. Just like what they can do. If with Milton Williams, you're hoping that he rounds out his game, like you've seen flashes, the elite run stopper, the elite pass rusher. If he can do both, like we saw with Barmore the last time he was at full strength, that is going to be a terrifying duo for offenses to match up with. Now, time to open up the mailbag, brother. All of you asked some fantastic questions, so we're going to get into some of those. First and foremost, what's your offensive line to start the season, and what's your O-line to end the season, which actually is a pretty fair question. Also, notably, Wes Schweitzer is now on the reserve/retired list as of a few days ago, so he no longer is in the mix in the trenches.
Yeah, that was an interesting one. No one really saw that coming, but here we are. Always one offensive lineman that seems to decide, you know what, this is just not fun anymore. So
the Robert Gallery move.
Yeah, it tends to happen every year. But if I had to guess, on June 13th, who the starting offensive line would be, just from left to right, we know Campbell at tackle, left tackle, Campbell, Cole Strange, Bradbury on Wenu, Moses is probably the group, and we'll see what happens. I'm holding out hope that Jared Wilson is going to factor into this at some point. We didn't see him do much during the spring. Might be dealing with something, I don't know. But hopefully, whether it's center, whether it's left guard, I just think him being in that mix just elevates the talent of that group in general, just with his skill and his athleticism. So as of right now, that was what I would expect to be the group, barring injury. I think it's pretty safe to say that there's a really good chance that that's the starting 5 week 1. But if I had to guess, Jared Wilson will be a factor at some point in this season, maybe at guard.
I'd say the same, because with how the depth chart lines up, you'd probably like Cole Strange to earn that job, someone who's played the position for a long time at the NFL level, a little bit less of a guessing game. And if he's able to have an entire spring and summer under his belt, that's a pretty good advantage for a guy who is relearning how to walk around this time last year. I'm going the same way. You just hope that Jared Wilson at some point can take that starting job. It's funny, he and Garrett Bradbury on kind of opposite ends of the spectrum, where like Jared Wilson one-on-one in pass pro, you feel pretty good about that. Bradbury, not so much. For Bradbury, Bradbury is I think a plus starter as a run blocker. It's not always going to be perfect, but he's going to give you some really mean reps. Whereas Jared Wilson, you do see as a run blocker, that's where he's got some room to grow, especially on some of those more downhill schemes. But yeah, ideally center is really the only position that has any kind of change by the end of the year. But speaking of the left guard, I am curious. This is a good question. Can Caden Wallace transition to guard, and who should be the front runner for the left guard spot right now, in your opinion?
Yeah, I definitely feel like Caden Wallace is another one I'd throw in there with Jared Wilson. If you're just looking at somebody that could potentially elevate that spot, when you watched him in the draft and heard about him in the draft, there was a lot of people that projected him as a guard at the next level as his best position. He kind of has that like wide body, that guard frame to him, bigger dude. So you could see it in like a downhill scheme too, playing right tackle, no doubt about it, especially in like a McDaniels offense with his body type. But I definitely could see a guard transition as well. And there's a really, really good history of college tackles moving inside to guard at the NFL recently, that certain guys have just really excelled in that. Obviously, we know Joe Tooney, but Zach Martin's probably the biggest one ever in that category. But just in general, there's a bunch of those guys. So I'm definitely for it. I think that Moses is going to hold down that position at right tackle for the year. So the best way for Caden Wallace to carve out a role here is probably to be a little bit of both, be a flex player that can play inside and outside in a pinch, but maybe he ends up just outright winning the left guard job if they give him that opportunity.
Yeah, I'm a little disappointed because I was hoping that he would be kind of so good at that backup right tackle spot, at least, that it was just like, nope, like he is going to be the future. We have Morgan Moses, but it's a guy in house that we like. But at the same time, when I was thinking that, I was also thinking that Layden Robinson was going to play a much bigger factor at left guard. And as we know in practice, for whatever reason, that has not been the case. That's probably one of my biggest disappointments from this spring. So what we're looking at right now, left guard is the spot where there's really no long-term answer in sight. And even if Jared Wilson, earns the job, Garrett Bradbury is doing well enough that you slot him in, Jared Wilson's not going to be there for any extended period of time, ideally. So Caden Wallace, third-round pick, a guy that you do have or will be on the roster, at least under contract, as long as you keep him for a little bit while longer. I do think that probably makes the most sense, especially I like that he's bigger at guard. Like, you have Will Campbell already. Honestly, that left side looks a little bit thin. I'm not going to lie. So having a bulkier guy, like, that was my ideal pick. If they went Will Campbell and then a guard, I was like, get a Jonas. Oh my God, I should not try to do that right now. I haven't tried to say his name in a very long time, but get a big bodied guy who can at least take up a little more space, maybe make life a little easier on Will Campbell.
And yeah, absolutely.
Okay, here's another one on the left guard. Will the Patriots add a left guard via trade or free agent cut? Now, I also kind of want to loop in, how did you feel about their decision not to add maybe a more established veteran left guard? Because again, with Layden Robinson in the equation at the time, I didn't mind. I'm thinking you got City So, Cole, Layden, and then they signed Wes. There's enough guys where you throw them at the wall and somebody sticks, but now with no Layden Robinson and Wes Schweitzer gone, I'm certainly feeling like I wouldn't be surprised or necessarily disappointed if they did add someone else to this competition.
Yeah, I really would have liked to have seen them do it, and I was kind of pounding the table for them to add a Morgan Moses of left guards, right? Just somebody that could hold it down for a year, that you feel really comfortable with, that has the experience, and then you draft somebody or develop somebody at some point to really take over that role long term. But they decided to go in a different direction there. I think they probably felt the same way that you did, Taylor, where you just invested these draft picks in Layden Robinson and City So and Cole Strange not too long ago. So one of those guys is bound to, the cream rise to the top, and somebody is going to take that job. And I'm not saying that hasn't happened yet, because we're way ways from pads and all that stuff and making an impact there. So maybe it will. Maybe Cole Strange will take the job and run with it. But in general, I would have liked to have seen maybe a little bit of a better player signed than Wes Schweitzer. It didn't have to be, a top guard on the market type of guy. It didn't have to be a Tooney trade necessarily, but just someone that you felt a little bit more comfortable in that spot. Now, could they still do it? I guess in theory. I mean, it's probably easier to find guards this time of year than it is to find tackles. So you could definitely try to do it. I will say, like, this isn't Chukwuekorfor, right? Like they're in better shape at that spot than they were, let's say, last year at tackle. But just knowing that you were going to draft Will Campbell, it just felt like having an experienced steady hand next to Will Campbell at left guard would have helped him out a lot to make his rookie season a little bit easier. Now there's a lot riding on Will Campbell just being a stud right out of the gate, pretty much, given the fact that left guard could be a weak point.
And I will say, obviously, you never want a glaring question mark on the offensive line, especially as you noted with a rookie beside him. That's a tough spot to put him in. But if there was one spot where they kind of had to throw things at the wall and see what sticks, you'd like it to be left guard because it's not a tackle. Right guard, they tend to be on an island more often. And center, as we saw last year, you need somebody who can consistently snap the ball, and obviously not as much communication because you're not in the West Coast offense anymore. But again, it's not tackle like it's been in years past where you're just like they're kind of screwed and there's not a great way to talk yourself into it where you feel really comfortable. At least left guard is maybe the one spot where if you had to have a weakness, you're saying, all right, it's not the worst thing in the world. Still would like to see it addressed, though, if anybody were to shake free. Are there any other positions that you could see them potentially targeting in a trade?
Well, obviously they're always going to be looking for that number one receiver until they find one. So that caveat aside, because I feel like you could say that to these types of questions every single time, but edge rusher, pass rusher off the edge, I think Chazon could probably do it as a third down guy for the year, a situational guy. And Landry, I think, is really solid. But if there's one position that I would look at moving forward, going into 2026 and beyond, that they could really use a foundational type player there, a true blue chipper like they have at quarterback or corner and, these other spots, I would say it'd probably be, an actual 3-down pass rusher that can do it consistently. So I like it, what they have up front. I don't love it. And I think that that's probably the missing ingredient is having a true difference making pass rusher.
And you're hoping that Keion White can kind of be that guy where you don't really need to take him off the field. But even then, he's going to kick inside at times. And while I like the depth that they have at edge much better than they've had at years past, where, like, God forbid somebody goes down, you at least have a couple guys in there where you don't think the pass rush is going to completely fall off a cliff. That said, and it's tough because Harold Landry is making so much that before camp, I'm thinking, all right, this guy's probably not going to leave the field very often. That hasn't been the case. It really has been a rotation with him and Chazon. So I agree. If you could find some kind of every down, real dangerous threat on the edge and match that with the Keion White or whomever, I'd be down. But going back to receiver, what do you think about all this Terry McLaurin stuff? Obviously, like, if he's available at all, they should probably be making a call. But how have you felt about him being in the news and obviously not being happy with the Commanders?
Oh, man. I mean, he's a hell of a player. So I would take him in a heartbeat if you could. But I would expect the Commanders are doing business the right way these days. They have a great owner now and great coaching staff and general manager and all from the top down. I just don't see them letting a guy like Terry McLaurin, who's not only a fantastic football player, but probably one of their biggest leaders in their locker room as well. And just a consummate kind of captain and pro. So I would expect that to get done. Now, if Terry McLaurin was available via trade, then the Patriots should be first on the phone, to try to get him out of Washington. But in general, I would expect him to stay with the Commanders.
Why can't they operate a little more like the Bengals, huh? Piss the guys off and make them want to go somewhere else to another fine young quarterback. Whatever. We won't get into that Bengals nonsense. But we will get a quick word in from our friends over at Prize Picks. Be right back.
Prize Picks is the best place to turn your sports knowledge into cash with millions of dollars. With millions of members, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all, and all you've got to do is pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash. So run your game all season long on Prize Picks. There is only one series left in the playoffs, and the championship is officially on the line, and that means time is running out for you to put your final takes to the test on Prize Picks. You think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander will have more than 30 points? You think Tyrese Halliburton will have less than 25? Cook up those hot takes with your friends and win real money this basketball season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. Again, it is the best place to win real money this basketball season. And all you got to do is download the app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, that's code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game.
Also, a reminder that I'm hopping into a Discord chat right after this show to answer some of your questions. So just for an understanding and a reminder real quick of how to join. Step 1, you will join our Discord server with the link pinned in the chat and in our description. Step 2, drop your YouTube username in the YouTube chat. or hashtag Patriots-General server to be verified. This gives you access to the stage, and only members can speak, but everyone can listen. And then finally, step 3, look for the Patriots Daily stage, and members can use the raise hand function to join the stage line. That's going to be a lot of fun. We've been doing that now for, I think, a couple weeks. It's been really fun. Last week, we had an even bigger audience than in some days past, so make sure to join us over there. It's going to be a great time. All right, Evan. Next mailbag question. What is most likely to tank the season? Campbell being a guard, which I could not see, but, Maye's turnovers increase. The defense doesn't gel, Vrabel, et cetera, et cetera. What do you think it's going to be that keeps this team from reaching what you think the expectations kind of are at this stage?
Probably Drake Maye. And I hate to put it all at his feet. Like, it's not fair necessarily. But if we're being honest, like, the one thing about this team that is really deciding the ceiling is whether or not he takes that second year jump. And we can call it turnovers, if you will. I'm not as worried about some other people about the turnovers, because the way I feel about it is if the touchdown production goes up, then I don't really care as much about the turnovers. Like, if you're telling me that he's threw 20 picks, but he threw 45 touchdowns, like, I'm going to be fine, right? Like, it's going to be okay. Now, obviously, if those numbers are closer, then that's a problem. And just in general, just him taking that next step, going back to his days at North Carolina, there was a lot of, okay, that was really good. 3-4 really good plays, and then there would be one not so good play or two not so good plays. And it's like that consistency, he needs to find that. And I'm hoping that Josh McDaniels can get that out of him by creating easier throws and layups and things like that don't make him work as hard for every single yard. But in general, this is sort of the MO on him right now at North Carolina and in his rookie season. There's a lot of flashes, but is he going to be consistent for 4 quarters?
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with Drake as well. And the turnovers last year, the thing that kept me from really being concerned is that they weren't very consistent in how they happened. It was kind of a lot of rookie mistakes, but in different ways, like the Zach Sealer strip. It's the one thing you never wanted to see him do. He did it. You never really saw that again. So turnovers aren't an issue, but the consistency definitely is, because you had times where he's holding on to the ball and if he gets it out, they're on schedule. When he doesn't, they're behind the sticks. It's really just being able to replicate the same thing from down to down. And as Bill said, it's not even so much about making the plays. Sometimes it's about the plays that you don't make and just being able to be smart and eat it. I think he'll be able to do that. I think we've seen that in camp. Practice is a time where you're okay seeing guys throw interceptions or forcing throws, but you also see that Drake has done a good job of getting through his reads and not forcing a throw. Maybe he scrambles, maybe it's a check down, and there's days where it feels like he's only thrown downfield once or twice. But at the same time, at least we see foundationally, he is protecting the football for the most part, at least when it comes to his decision-making. The accuracy, he's had his moments, where it'll sail on him sometimes, especially on those crossing routes. I feel like that's where I'd really like to see him take another step, but yeah, if Drake plays well, I think it raises this offense, and then that complements a defense that I think is going to be easily in the top half of the league. But if Drake doesn't play well, yeah, that's probably going to be what holds you back as a team. Sticking to the offense, do you see Josh McDaniels employing more bootlegs for Drake Maye? I remember in 2009 with Kyle Orton, he implemented an offense called the Crazy Horse. I've never actually heard of the Crazy Horse, but that sounds pretty sick.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we saw that a lot this spring. And one of my biggest takeaways from all of this schematically, and I'll try my best not to give too much away and get myself in trouble, but you look at the bootlegs and the way that they kind of incorporated almost West Coast principles when they went under center, maybe a little bit more than I was expecting. I'm sure those gap runs and the downhill play actions and stuff like that are in the bag still, but a little bit more of that. He hasn't really had a quarterback, going even back to Brady, who was someone you wanted to get on the move and wanted to get outside the pocket on bootlegs and things of that nature. So I talked about layups and easy yards and helping him kind of just not have to carry so much of a burden on his shoulders. That's definitely one way to go about it. You get some of those easy throws into the flats, or even be your own check down if you have to on some of those bootlegs. Those can be nice, easy yards for him. So I definitely expect that to be a part of it. Now, the big question is, as you know, Taylor, they've been trying to run more outside zone for probably half a decade now and have never been able to do it. So can they figure out how to do that? And have the outside zone plays and have the motions and the things like that the Shanahans and the McVays do to incorporate that, then that will be the next step. But man, it's been like at least going back to 2022 that we hear about outside zone being a bigger part of this offense, and it's never stuck. So we'll see.
And I hope that Thomas Brown changes that a little bit. He's been in these outside zone centric kind of schemes. Like, did he overlap with Nick Caley, or were they ships in the night?
They were ships in the yeah. He was with the Rams, a couple years ago, and then he was in Carolina with Frank Reich for a while. So yeah, I don't think he ever was with Caley.
Right. And because I know when he got to Carolina, they wanted to run a lot more outside zone, but they couldn't really because they had just this monstrous offensive line that was much better going downhill. And like, even when the Patriots had Cam Newton and Josh McDaniels, which was a much different offense, he wasn't really great at throwing on the run either. So there were some bootlegs, but I'm studying their play action scheme now, and there isn't a whole lot of those like nakeds and stuff like that, even though it's in the playbook. So you're hoping Thomas Brown, a guy who's had the experience running those kinds of offenses, can integrate a little bit more of that, because absolutely with Drake Maye, the playbook's going to be wide open, I think, as long as Drake and the guys around him are comfortable. So definitely expect more of those moving pockets, and also like some more runs as well. That's just kind of, I mean, Josh McDaniels went on Games with Names last year and compared Drake to Josh Allen, being like, oh, I want to see if they run him, they throw with him. And we saw that Drake can do a little bit of everything. So that's going to be another exciting element to watch for. Name, it doesn't have to be several, I'm not going to put you on the spot like that, but name some sleeper / unexpected players who have a nice chance of making the starting Patriots lineup.
Well, I would have said Wes Schweitzer like 3 days ago, but
Right.
now that one, that ship has sailed. Starting lineup, I don't know if it's a sleeper. I mean, I guess I have two. Like, Christian Ellis, I think, is going to play a lot on this defense. At linebacker, especially where we're not entirely sure when Tavai will be back with this injury, if he even really fits what they're trying to do schematically at that linebacker spot. So I'd expect to see a lot of Christian Ellis. And the other one that I would throw out there is Craig Woodson. He's probably my biggest surprise. I don't have to take too much of your thunder then, but yeah, he was probably my biggest surprise of the whole spring. Like, I got to be honest with you, when they drafted him, that was the first pick in the entire draft for them that I was like, maybe a little early here on Craig Woodson. And as it turns out, based off the spring, and look, it's just the spring, but they might have been better at their job than me, which is not shocking at all. So we'll see if maybe they were right about that with Craig Woodson. But him as a third safety, he can do a bunch of different things, play in the slot, play in the box, but I think even playing free safety as well. So we'll see what happens with him. But those would be my two on defense.
And LA Wolf told us they're going to stick with that 3 safety package. That's a starting package against teams that run a lot of base. And for what we've seen, so my first game watching Craig Woodson, I hadn't watched him before the draft because I was focusing on more of their bigger positions of need. The first game I watched was Syracuse, and it was the worst game I think he played in college, where like they're just killing him with all these throws to tight ends. And I'm like, I don't love this, but then you literally see every other game, and I think the flashes there of like, all right, not a lot of glaring mistakes. He makes some plays from split safety alignments. He's competitive, at least in man coverage, and I think a lot of that translated where we were saying it during camp, like, yeah, this guy's around the ball pretty consistently, so that's a good sign, especially for a young player, if they're just around, because it means they're generally probably reading things out pretty well. I'll go with the offensive side of the ball, and honestly, this might be more due to attrition than anything else, but Jack Westover. I don't like that because I will say the tight end group outside of Hunter Henry and Austin Hooper has been very disappointing. Now, to be fair, not a lot of these guys that are known as great pass catchers, a lot of them I think are really going to make their bones when the pads come on and they can actually block and be physical. But there were like drops. You didn't see a lot of production from the backup tight ends. But Jack Westover got the vast majority of those reps when you didn't see Austin Hooper participating, when Hunter Henry wasn't on the field, or when they were in multiple tight end sets. And it just feels like whether it's on the wing, whether it's at fullback, whether it's in line, he's going to have some kind of role. Hopefully, once we get to the summer, we can really get excited about him maybe participating. And obviously, CJ Dupree, they paid him a ton of money. So he's another guy you want to see kind of flash once the pads come on. But I think Jack Westover is a guy that they like. Thomas Brown, mentioned him specifically while talking about players and versatility. So don't sleep on him. They acquired him last year, different regime, and he's stuck around and at least is in the rotation pretty heavily. But what did you think of that tight end position as well? Because I was hoping at least Dupree would maybe stand out, but I feel like it was just either very quiet or not good when you did see the ball thrown their way.
Yeah, it wasn't a whole lot to take away from the spring. Like you said, a lot of those guys, especially Dupree, is more of a blocking tight end, and that's not necessarily going to shine in this type of setting in the spring. So we'll see. That's how he's going to make the team. He's a big dude, and that's the one thing that stood out about him right away, really at rookie minicamp all the way back in May, was like, okay, this is a big dude. We're talking 6'5", 6'6", 250 plus. Like, this guy's definitely going to be able to block. I don't know if it's role. I don't know if it's just that he's not good. Like, Jaheim Bell is still kind of not doing as much as I was hoping that he would do in terms of kind of making a leap into a role in his second season. I still, and we've talked about this off the air, like, I still feel like it's role specific for the most part. And I'm not saying that they have this like diamond in the rough that they're have untapped potential with necessarily, not going that far. But to me, he's like an H-back. He's somebody that's going to have to be used in different, various ways, creative ways, getting him on slide routes into the flats and screens and scheme touches and things like that. And, maybe if you get him in the backfield and you send him out on a vertical and he's in a foot race with a linebacker instead of a defensive back, like, he can win those. But if you're just asking him to be a traditional tight end, I just don't think that's going to ever be a strength of his. It's not, he's a better player, but like, it's not that far departure from Jonnu, right? In a system like this, where it's just like Jonnu is a great player when he's used in like a West Coast offense, like he's in Miami right now, or was in Tennessee. But he's not going to be one of those guys that's going to get to the top of the route, break down, make a cut, get open, catch the ball, and transition quickly and all that kind of stuff. So Jaheim Bell's they got to use him in a different way, I think, if they're going to get anything out of him.
And my issue with that is, especially in this offense, I just think there's not a lot of margin for error if you are that kind of gadgety guy. Like with Jonnu, I understood people wanting him to get more touches, but I'm thinking, like, watch what happens when he gets them. He's bobbling the ball, he's dropping it, and it's getting picked off. Like, it doesn't look natural. And it's not, if you are going to be a gadget guy and a role player, you can't really make mistakes because you have a very limited opportunity. And with Jaheim, that's my issue with him. It's the same with Jonnu, but Jonnu at least had the wow plays where you're like, all right, I get why people want him to get the ball more, but there's also, the reality that he's not very consistent. Jaheim hasn't even shown those flashes, and that's what I was hoping for. Like, we had the catch down the seam with Craig Woodson in coverage, and I'm thinking, yes, like, we're starting to see it, let's go, and then nothing after that. So I don't want to pile on that position group, but just guys that I did like, especially Jaheim. I wrote a whole thing on him when he got drafted, so hoping he can maybe, once things, the physicality ramps up, show us a little bit more.
Yeah, it's a position. No, it's okay. I just wanted to add one more thing. Like, it's a position that there's a couple different spots on this roster where it was just going to be impossible to hit every single position in one offseason. Like, they weren't going to get a young, talented player with upside at every single hole on the roster. And they brought back Hooper, they brought back Henry, and they definitely felt like they kind of just kicked the can down the road on tight end, which is totally fair. I think for the way that they went about the offseason, there were bigger needs. Henry's a really good player still. They had more pressing holes than getting that developmental tight end. But again, 2026, like, that's now going to be at the top of everybody's draft board. So we'll see what happens.
It's kind of like the left guard of the skill players, where it's like, if you don't have a great tight end, like, it's not great, but it could be worse. All right, now a little bit more schemy question. Who's starting when the Patriots are in 11 personnel, and what will the split be percentage-wise, 11 versus 12 versus 21? I think this is really interesting because I think Josh wants to be a 21-heavy type of offense, but I don't know. And again, it's Brock Lampy's the only real fullback, and he hasn't been able to do his fullback stuff. But I am curious, since they don't have that Jakob Johnson, where it's kind of like, this dude can really bang, and he's kind of has that history of it, even though it was a different situation a little bit.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how they categorize 21, because I think 21 could have two different meanings. You're going to have the fullback and the regular package with 21. I also think you're going to see a lot of two running back, 21 as well. So, maybe just based off of the numbers, if you put that all in one category of 21, then I think there's going to be a lot of 21, percentage wise. Every team's going to be 11 personnel heavy at the end of the day. Like, everyone's going to be in 11 the majority of the time. These other personnel groupings, the heavy groupings are more secondary to that. But starting in the 11 personnel, if I had to guess right now, I would say Kayshon Boutte on the outside until Stephon Diggs is ready to go. Pop, obviously, in the slot. Then the third one, it becomes interesting. Obviously, if Diggs is healthy, Diggs will be out there in some capacity. It's really, is Kyle Williams going to push Kendrick Bourne, or Kendrick Bourne is going to be the odd man out in that? I guess we'll see. I would say for week one, maybe not. Maybe that's Kendrick Bourne for the time being. And then obviously, Henry and whoever they have at back. But it'd be interesting to see, to me, how much of that pony package they actually use, because we saw a lot of it this spring. It makes sense. Like Ramondre and Travion Henderson are very complimentary running backs, and Henderson can kind of be used as like a gadget player, and you can line him up outside. So there's different things you could do with him. I'm not like the biggest proponent for pony packages, just looking at the metrics and things like that. I know it's not everything, but they don't tend to be the most productive packages. And I guess it depends on the team. And if you have two running backs, like, really can make a difference. But just looking at things like EPA and yards per play and things like that, they tend to be on the lower side because it's like a base early down type of thing. And we'll see. But I think there are going to be a lot of that. I don't know about 12. 12 will be interesting. We'll see how much of that they actually get into. I just think they're worried a little bit about the speed on the field. They want to try to get as much explosiveness on the field as possible. And Henry and Hooper packages just don't necessarily accomplish that.
And the thing is, when you do have the two tight ends, though, they're the two guys that Drake is clearly the most comfortable with when it comes to, like, all right, you're in tight coverage downfield, but I know that if I throw it to you in the right spot, you're going to be able to make the catch. So it's like, do you want the speed, or do you just want somebody who at least Drake is comfortable with? That's why for right now, I think in terms of base 12 is probably going to be what we see more than anything else. And that 12 could also be like Hooper or Hunter Henry serving as a fullback. It could be different things. I agree. I think 21 is usually a lot better in theory than it actually is on the field. Like when we have the pony package of Zeke and Mondre, I was like, okay, that could be fun. But like if Zeke is what I think he is right now, that's like no one's afraid of that, right? You just have two running backs. Henderson's different because he has the versatility. He's a home run threat. If you use him as the guy that you're moving around, that's a little bit more interesting to me. And then 11, I think it's Boutte or Kyle Williams at the X, and I just don't know if Kyle Williams is going to be able to win that job. Obviously, unless he has a really great summer in preseason. That Z, I think it's going to be Kendrick or it's going to be Matt Collins. If Matt Collins starts on PUP, I think that's how Kendrick makes the roster. And then Diggs is maybe like a guy that you want on the field more in passing situations. So we know that Z, you're going to block. You'd rather have that as a Kendrick Bourne or ideally a Matt Collins than a Diggs. Like Diggs is going to get open. You don't necessarily want him getting and doing all the dirty work and stuff like that. So that Z spot, I think, is going to be Holland/Bourne and then Diggs in the rotation. Pop in the slot, but we'll also see Diggs there. Yeah, that outside spot, I don't like it, to be honest. I don't love the idea of forcing Kyle Williams to be that X, especially because he's going to move around. But, I mean, Kayshon seems to have that job kind of in the bag. They rotate, but there's no one else even who fits the skill set. So we'll see what happens there. And then, 21 in terms of actual 21, I don't know how much we're going to see it because we don't really have that true designated fullback. All right, I'm going to get you out of here after a couple more real quick. Roderick says this is an Efton Chisholm question, but if the Patriots allow a UDFA to get scheduled media appearances with reporters, isn't that a strong sign of that player's chance to make the team? I actually don't know. I don't know the answer to this question. You actually work for the team. So does that mean anything?
No, I wouldn't look too much into that. I don't know how much behind the curtain people really care about, but you guys actually are the ones that request which players are become available, and then it's just whether or not the team wants to make them available. But I am sure that Andrew Callahan is the chapter president for the Patriots beat, and I am sure that Andrew has put Efton Chisholm on the list for like every single practice, and so finally they were just like, all right, fine, like we'll give you Efton Chisholm. So no, I wouldn't look too much into that sort of thing. I don't think that there's a ton to glean. But we haven't talked about Efton Chisholm, which I think is I think that's impressive. Like I think 40 minutes on this team from the spring, and we haven't even mentioned Efton Chisholm yet. I think is a good thing because let's like just slow down just a little bit. I definitely have learned my lesson when it comes to overrating guys based off of spring practices, especially skill players when there's really no press and there's no contact and they're just kind of running through open types of space. But he has a skill set. It's very clear that he has a fit in this offense, as we all know. So there's a path because of that. In my mind, it's more of like, right now it's more of a theory than it is like this guy is something real. But he's definitely set the table for potentially making the roster and as we move forward. But it's really right now, to me, it's like the theory or the idea of Efton Chisholm makes a lot of sense because of what we've seen in the past with the success of that body type and that skill set. So that's my Efton Chisholm take.
And a lot of the hype around him was the fact that like Kendrick Bourne wasn't there for a couple of days. He had more opportunities, and just the simple fact that, and this was pretty predictable, just given like who the backup receivers were, that Chisholm was probably going to be the favorite for like Joshua Dobbs and Ben Wooldridge, because it's a guy who's in a role where he's probably going to be open more often than not. And just watching him, it was what I think you hope to see, where it's not a ton of wasted movement, still plenty of room to grow. But it looks different than like a Javon Baker, where he looks more like a wild horse, where it's like he does incredible things, but it's like, it looks so kind of not unprofessional. That's not the right way to put it, but like he still has a long way to go. Whereas with Efton, it's like when he catches it, it's solid. His route running looks very crisp. It's just a certain aesthetic that we know for these Patriots slot Z receivers. And Efton definitely does look early on like he's going to fill that mold, but like, I'm not sliding this guy to have like 50 catches this year. I think ideally he's someone who develops, maybe contributes on special teams, but doesn't play a whole lot as a rookie. That said, I could see if he does sneak onto the roster, maybe he keeps working in the background, could carve out a role for himself as just that like Jacoby Myers type, where when they go 21 and they just have those crossing routes, I could see Chisholm eating on those specific plays where if you run the route right and you are a guy with some quick twitch to you, you're going to have some success. And he's kind of flashed after the catch too. Like you see, he's got that little juke to him, but a little jump cut there.
That was the one concern I had about him watching him at Eastern Washington was like the juice after the catch. Like he just doesn't have he doesn't have another gear with the ball in his hands to run away from packs of people. But he's quicker. You know, he's got that little jitterbug that, okay, it might not be 20 extra yards. It might be like 3 extra yards, but at least he's getting those extra yards in some capacity. But the change of direction, the skill set now, like you mentioned though, with Jacoby Myers, with Edelman, even with Wes Welker, like it takes those guys time to really produce. Like it took Edelman like 3 or 4 years before he really became Julian Edelman. Now he was behind guys, but still it took him time to
Myers
really
too. Didn't he say like Cam Newton had to give him confidence because he was just kind of spinning for a while?
Yeah. You know, his rookie year, it was notable that Brady trusted it enough to at least have him on the field towards the end of the season. But it wasn't like his production was off the charts. So that position in general usually takes a year or two at least for a player to truly carve out a high volume type of role. So I liked what I saw, but let's slow down just a little bit. That's all.
That is absolutely fair. All right, we'll close it out with this one. How likely is it that the Patriots are going to play exactly how Vrabel played with the Titans? Do you expect him to adapt more to his personnel? I personally feel like definitely yes. Like I know people thought that he was going to run the ball a ton because it's what he did with Derrick Henry, that he was going to play a lot of zone coverage because it's what he did with the Titans, but he's kind of dispelled both of those himself, where he kind of acknowledged like, yeah, I had Derrick Henry, I ran the ball a lot, and I want to play cat coverage if I have the players. So how different, I would say, do you think this Patriots team is going to be from those Titans teams based on maybe what we would have thought around the hiring when it happened?
Yeah, definitely different. You know, they don't have Derrick Henry. No disrespect to Ramondre, but like he's not Derrick Henry, and I think he would admit that himself. So they don't have Derrick Henry. So that's definitely going to be different. But one of the things I'm most encouraged about with Vrabel in general is that he just has a great feel for everything. It seems like he just has his like a finger on the pulse of what's going on. And one thing I think they are going to be is very situation and game plan dependent, where, you know, certain weeks, certain times of the game, like he has that feel. And I remember McDaniels talking about it with Bill, that Belichick would just get in his headset about things like that. And Belichick wasn't calling plays. Like he wasn't like, hey, like let's run power here, you know, like it wasn't like that. But he would get in the headset and be like, hey, Josh, like let's run the ball a little bit here. Like the defense is gassed. Like they've been on the field for a ton of time, or, you know, let's go into closeout mode, 4-minute offense, and that, like, those little types of things. And I think that's what Vrabel's going to bring to the table as well, is just situational awareness of, what's the game flow, what's going on in the game, what's the conditions of the game, and then be able to adjust from there. So that is a long-winded way of saying I think they're going to kind of be pretty game plan specific every single week. So some weeks they might run it 40 times. Other weeks they might throw it 40 times. We'll see.
And I think it's important because, like, we're not trashing the last regime or anything like that, but the reality is that it didn't feel like they always had their finger on the pulse. Like, obviously, we could talk about all the media stuff, but, like, purely in games, how many times did it feel like you're running the ball well and then you stop running it, or it feels like it's getting a little too pass heavy, or the defense starts, like, blitzing and you're saying, well, they're killing the blitz, so I don't know why you're leaning into this and not kind of switching up your tactics. And at the time, it's okay, this is a young staff, have some patience, and we all know how that worked out. But it is nice to kind of go into the season knowing that Vrabel, as the CEO type head coach, no, he's not calling plays, but he is locked into how things are flowing and has the experience of not only having made those decisions and his own adjustments, but the experience of when those things don't go right. And you have to kind of change and say, look yourself in the mirror and say, maybe I shouldn't have done that, and be able to move on. He's already made a lot of those mistakes, which obviously will benefit him greatly in his second time around. But Evan, thank you as always, buddy. This was a blast. Before I let you go, please let the people know where they can find you, because they don't know already, and what great stuff you got coming down the pipeline that everybody should be looking out for.
Yeah, so obviously Patriots.com is the spot, and our shows, Catch 22 and Unfiltered, Catch 22 with Alex, of course, is those are going to continue all throughout this dead period of the off season. So we're not going anywhere. I will be going on vacation at some point, but other than that, we're going to be good. I'm not quite on the Mike Cadlick budget though for vacations and honeymoons, but that's a different story for a different time. But yeah, we'll be on Catch 22 and Unfiltered and all those good things here coming up. And then, right into training camp. We do positional previews and stuff like that come July. But for right now, I think all of us are welcoming a nice little breath here until we get into training camp. So that'll be exciting.
Like you, I wish I had that Cadlick budget, but hopefully he's watching right now, my tie in hand, and knowing my good friend Mike, he is definitely sunburned to shit right now. But enjoy, Mike. Thank you for coming back on, Evan. And thank you all, as always, for watching. Now take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. We will see you next time. Peace, y'all.